Welcome to the Human Being Unleashed podcast, where we redefine, realign, and reimagine what it means to be human so that you can live a life with the health, wealth, and relationships that are inherently yours. Parker, you're coming in at a wonderful time. Welcome to another episode of the Human Being Unleashed. This man is really the epitome of that, and everything that he stands for is some of the most beautiful things. And before we dive into this, I just want to say personally, before we jumped on here, me and Parker were chatting for a second, and I was just like personally thanking him because at the time, me and him just, we reconnected again. This conversation me and him had is what led me to wanting to bring him on here because I feel like this is not talked about enough. So with that all being said, I'm sitting here with a good friend of mine named Parker J. He is a mentor, and I really don't want to sit here and demolish this guy's bio because I feel like no words can really do what he does justice. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start here. I genuinely believe that some of the best ways for us to learn as human beings, and Parker, I can imagine that you agree as well, is through story. So one of the things that it really interests me whenever I meet people like you is, what was it that even got you doing what you're doing? I know it's a loaded question to start with, but how did it all start and how did you get to where you're at in this current thing?
Oh my goodness, man. Wow.
I know.
First of all, I just want to say I appreciate you, man. It was so cool to have that conversation with you and then for you to turn around and message me not that long after. You're like, yeah, I made these decisions and I changed that. And it's like, it's so cool to see that, like, to have a conversation and to see somebody take action on it. And just a few things I said in passing and you just ran with it. That was so cool to see. And I appreciate you big time.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. It was crazy, bro. Literally just that conversation. And I remember I asked you a question and you gave me an answer I did not want, but it was like the answer I needed 100%.
Ooh, I'm curious. What was that stood out for you that you didn't want to hear?
Well, I didn't want to hear that. I was uncertain with myself at that time. Because so the conversation I had with Parker, just to like let everybody in, was I, had this new business offer, basically a new business idea. And I was like, I think this thing may be pretty good. And I was like, yo, Parker, so I got this idea, man. And what do you think? Is this a good idea or not? He was like, well, like, I don't know. And he was all like, why are you like asking me that? And then the way that you answered the question was you basically got what I was feeling that I didn't want to put into words. And you basically said it. You're like, it wasn't a yes or no answer. It was like, are you sure this is what you want to do? Or why do you seem uncertain right now? And that it just basically called out what I was feeling. And that's what made me really take our conversation into like serious consideration. After me and you had talked about that shadow work. And that's what introduced me to
man.
You were the first person who introduced me to that. So yeah.
That makes me so happy because I think so often we're running 1,000,000 miles an hour. And I talk about this so much. This is back to my story. It's like, it depends how far back we want to go into my story, but I think everything is part necessary. Of my story has been climbing the ladder of success. When I was 4 years old, I was molested. And I think from that moment, I made a decision that, first of all, I felt defective internally. And I made the decision that I was going to prove that I wasn't by being perfect. I was going to prove that I wasn't defective by being perfect. What did perfect look like? Let's be successful. Let's make money. Let's get in shape. Let's travel the world. Let's have an 8-figure business. Let's do all these things. And I had a facade of success and I was left internally bankrupt because I had gotten really good at climbing the ladder of success, but it was leaning against the wrong wall and it was sitting on a sinking foundation. It doesn't matter how fast you climb. If you're building it on the wrong foundation, if you're climbing a ladder leaning against the wrong wall, if you have a facade of success instead of true internal wealth, man, it doesn't matter what you're going after. It doesn't work.
Mm. Yeah. And that is really what you this entire conversation is going, because I know that what you're doing now is not your first business. Like you said, you've been climbing this, like your story was climbing the ladder of success. So what was that first business for you? And when did you have the realization that you were probably climbing the wrong ladder in the first place?
Yeah, man. So I had gone through, and it was such a journey. I mean, like from age 4 till probably 13, I was super introverted. I would still consider myself like an introvert in some ways. Like I like my me time for sure, but I
Mm-hmm.
was just uncomfortable around people. And I remember I was just about 13. I think I was actually 12, and it was the first time I drank alcohol because I got bullied. I was introverted. I was uncomfortable around people from like 4 till about 12. And then I started drinking alcohol at about 12, 13 years old. And I remember I finally could relax. I could finally like be myself for a moment. And obviously, I was getting that from the wrong source. I was getting it from a decreasing marginal return source. And that led to, well, I was hooked on the feeling of finally being able to relax and be myself again for a second, finally, like let go of that tight grip of control and release. That felt
Mm.
good, but I was getting it from something external. And I got hooked on the feeling of being myself. I got hooked on feeling authentic. I got hooked on feeling like I could be uninhibited, but I was doing it through an exogenous means. I was doing it through external means. So I got hooked on drinking and partying. And one drink wasn't enough any more than I needed five. Five wasn't enough, then I needed 10. 10 wasn't enough, then I needed 20. 20 wasn't enough, then I needed drugs. And drugs weren't enough. I needed drugs and women and alcohol and everything to try to plug this hole of I am leaking. Something is leaking within me. And there was a big hole. And this kind of ties back to your question of how did I get started in business? Well, both my parents were entrepreneurs. I'm super, super grateful for so many things that they've led me to in my life. My parents are amazing people and they're both entrepreneurs. And I knew from like, I remember taking a school project in like grade 7, they were asking what I wanted to do. It was like, and I knew from that moment, that was the first business I started, that I wanted to be a real estate developer. I wanted to get into real estate. My father was in real estate. I remember driving around like 5 years old where I was looking at real estate deals. So at 18 years old, I started getting into real estate. And it's really interesting because in my head, this is what I was supposed to do because that was my obvious path to success.
Mm-hmm.
I had never actually stopped till at that point in my life, and I still didn't do this for a long, long time from 18. I had never actually stopped to ask, what do I want? What am I passionate about? What lights me up? What brings me joy? Where are my unique talents and abilities? Where do I actually want to do? And it was like, no, here's this path of success. You already got a head start. Your father's in real estate. You should head down this path. So that's the path I was running at all the way through. And I was way too blind to see it because at that time when I started, I was still very much in the phase of drugs, alcohol, party. How can I feel uninhibited and feel truly myself for a moment? But when I go back to day, I'm just going to put my head down and I'm going to get great grades in school. I'm going to start a business at 18 years old. I'm going to be perfect, or at least what I thought was perfect, so I can get to the top of success. And the true me is leaking out on the weekends through means of partying.
Now,
so that's where I got started.
Really quick, when you say the true me is leaking out, I have an idea of what you mean by that. Can you elaborate?
I think that's a great question because I don't mean the true me was needed drugs and alcohol. Yeah. I mean, there was a true me, and this kind of starts going into the shadow. There is, when we are not living in alignment, when we are not clear and clean mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, we end up chasing after things, relationships, businesses, money, even things within those categories like getting in shape or work or whatever that is. There is something we get chasing, and we can create success, sure. Like I'm going to air quote it, success. And if you get success while compromising alignment, it will start leaking out in other ways. So the true me was hiding and was in pain and didn't feel like he was expressing himself in his normal life. The only way I could feel like I expressed myself was the temporary few hours that I wasn't sober. So I got hooked on that temporary fleeting feeling of I can let loose and actually stop being this facade of who I'm trying to be and just be me. And me was in a lot of pain. Me was not happy, but at least, and it's this weird paradox of that's what happens when me is not happy and in a lot of pain. I can only let him out when I'm not sober. I can only let him out when I'm not actually myself, because I'm too afraid of what it would mean to actually be me in my real life, because then I would have to face my emotions. Man, if you talked to me back then, I'll show you a video sometime, man.
Dude, yes.
I am not the same person. I was literally like a robot. I was living from the neck up. It's completely trapped in my mind. I was the most analytical, left-brained, uptight. People often thought I came off as very, very like conceited or like full of myself. And honestly, like what that was I was so stuck in my head. I was so worried that they might judge me that I was like this rigid. And that was my protective mechanism of, I'm going to try to impress you. And oh man, I can't believe I lived like that.
I'm like saying, like, I'm sitting there, I'm like, I've only known you for like a little bit over a year, and I could have never imagined, because the first time we met, you never came off like that. So it's, yes. And so what you're saying is that true self was that natural expression of energy, that natural expression that you just were afraid of feeling in some way. Is that what you're saying, or?
Well, I didn't think I knew how to feel it. I think we have a natural expression to feel that way, but I had so many reasons, so many masks and layers and facades of I'm successful. I'm afraid of feeling my emotions. I have habits and routines that are repressing those further down. Like that's what the alcohol or drugs is doing. It's like it lets out a side of you, but represses further down, numbs out your actual emotions, your actual feelings. And it's this weird thing of like, it wasn't the true me. It felt like the true me is maybe even better way of phrasing that. Is so the true
Makes
me.
Perfect sense.
And this is one thing, everything I talk about when I'm talking about these categories is like, it's imperfect language and it's also paradoxical. It's like, we're talking about things that are very hard for our left brain to comprehend.
Yeah, don't cling on to the words, in other words.
Exactly. Do not cling on to the words, because in a sense, that was the true me trying to escape, but it was getting stuffed down by another side of me that was like wearing a mask, and it felt like it could only express itself this way and felt like some level of inhibition, but also it felt some level of being able to let go of its inhibition.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Temporarily, but meanwhile was also doing something to shove down the real me that could have done that without drugs and alcohol, that could have done that without having to run away, that could have done that in his business, that could have started a business that what he actually wanted to do. But that's okay. So I'll kind of keep going with my story.
Yeah, go ahead.
Or actually, if you got a question, hop in. Man.
Well, I mean, the question was probably going to keep you going on your story, because my question was, you said, you didn't, like stop to ask yourself for a while what you really wanted, what you really like truly desired. And I'm curious as to how long this phase of life that you're telling me about, how long did that go to, and like when was that moment for you?
Yeah, man. And there were different iterations. I think a lot of the time we learn lessons kind of like a spiral staircase. We learn the same lesson at a higher level, at a higher level, at a higher level, at a higher level. So there were different moments of realization of deeper clarity of what I really wanted. There was a version of me coming out of high school that, again, I did great in high school. Part of me thought I was supposed to be a doctor because that's successful. And I had the marks to do it. So, and I ended up making the decision to go to business school instead because that was more authentic. So I'm taking business school, got my real estate development company. I'm building houses. And it's not making any money. I'm doing it because but I'm not really all in because I'm not really all there on it. It's mostly or a big percentage of it is from a supposed to, not a want to, but I'm a supposed to do this. Because if I do what I'm supposed to, then I'll be successful. And if I'm successful, then I'm perfect. And if I'm perfect, I'm not defective. I promise. Please believe me. But it wasn't the truth. I felt that way inside instead of actually facing and healing and actually doing the work to get aligned. And I was running from it for a long, long time. So that was one of the next iterations. From there, real estate was never really making me any money, I remember, and I was never really all in on it. There came a moment I ultimately, when I graduated from college, I ended up working at managing a restaurant, and the restaurant was failing. And I came in and it was like, basically, you come turn this place around or we're going to have to shut its doors. And I remember I came in and it was another, you got a question on that?
No, go ahead. I'm just saying, okay.
And it was so interesting because it was another compromise of what I really wanted. I knew I didn't really want to do that. It didn't feel aligned, but I needed money. It was a good opportunity for a 23-year-old kid to be running this restaurant. I also they were going to pay me based on profit, basically. So I could work as much or as little as I want. And I just got to come in and I get paid based on if I can create results. And I ended up turning that restaurant around. It went from losing 200 grand a year to making 200 grand a year. And I was only working 5 or 10 hours a week doing it by the end. So it was like great gig for a 24-year-old to be making some good money working part-time. And internally, I felt depleted. I felt bankrupt because it wasn't authentically me. So what did I do? I finally woke up and quit that. I stopped the job, and how I ended up in that job was back to my father being an entrepreneur. He was actually 1/5 owner of the restaurant along with a bunch of other guys. That's how I ended up in that role. So I had to go back to this man who and this is another big part of my story, is I think there were many moments in my childhood that, and it's amazing how we get programmed in. And it's like, even now, as a grown man, there's a little boy part inside of me that still has pain around this. Isn't this amazing? And if you're not aware of that, that can run your life into the ground, into the walls, off cliffs. But I remember,
if they're not aware of what, I want to make sure they caught that. If they're not aware of what,
you're not aware that you have parts of you that is a little boy or a little girl inside that still hurt from the things that happened. Oh boy, and this is how I was running, because here's another belief that I adopted, and a lot of these aren't even necessarily true. Was it true that I was defective just because I was molested? No. Was it? Here's another one that, and they don't all have to be extreme, like being molested. When I was late, like 7, 8 years old, I was playing sports, and my father was challenging me to be better at the sports I was playing. Hockey, baseball. He played these sports. He was taking me out to practice. He'd take me out to the park, take me out, play pond hockey on the lake. And we'd do these things, and he'd be challenging me to practice and get better. And what an amazing thing to have a father who's investing his time in helping you get better at the sports you're playing. Like, what an amazing thing. But part of me knew that was good. And then part of me felt like I'm not loved because dad doesn't like me the way I am, because I'm not as good as he wants me to be. So I have this thing, this inner child that, if I'm not paying attention, is trying to prove he's enough to his father. So there's another reason. If I'm successful, then dad will love me. If I'm successful, then I'm not defective. And there's all these different layers of running after it. So imagine here, now I'm at this restaurant and I am successful at it, but I'm hating it internally. I am not aligned at all. I am not doing what I'm meant to be doing. And I have to have this conversation with my father. And I remember him and I were at a challenging place in our relationship. I'm so grateful for where it's gone because of these tough conversations. But I remember there were a lot of tears involved because I had so much emotion pent up, because again, I didn't know there was these parts of me that were hurting inside. I didn't know that there was parts of me that were completely running their life out of a facade, out of trying to prove something. I was completely unaligned. I was not clear. I was not connected. I was not healthy. And I went to have this, and I was finally making some decisions. And again, here's another loop on the spiral staircase of I am going to make the decision of I want to quit. I want to go full time on my real estate, and I'm going to actually make some money at it this time. I'm not just going to play around. I'm not going to take a side job. I'm going all in on that. And that's when I ended up going into. So I have that conversation with my father. Get out of the restaurant game, and went full time in commercial real estate, which is one of the businesses I own now.
Okay. Huh. Now, when one of the things I think we should kind of just focus this conversation on right now is the inner part of yourself that you felt like you didn't even know that you had, right? So how did you go about personally, one, discovering these parts of yourself, and then two, how did you release that part of yourself or heal that part of yourself, whatever word we're going to use for that? But yeah.
It's a good question, man. And I think it is an ongoing process. It's not done. It's never done. There is a awareness that you get distance from it. And I'm separating my hands if you're not watching this on video. It's like you're getting distance from it. I think often we think we are these parts of ourselves, and they come on and they take over. And there is a series, and there's so many practices. And we talked about this with, like, you and I talked about this on our previous call, is about being clean and clear and aligned mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Because if we are not clean and clear and aligned, we cannot see when these parts are taking over, and we end up showing up as them.
Oh, okay. So when you have the clarity, right? When you're clear in yourself, you're able to be aware enough to catch these parts as opposed to them catching you. And like
that's a good way of putting it, because we can either pay attention and say, oh, look, isn't that cute that there's a 7-year-old boy that needs some love and is trying to prove he's enough by having an 8-figure real estate business. Isn't that cute? And let's give ourselves some love. Or we can be busy. Hey, 8 figures isn't enough. I need 9 figures. No, I got to hit $1 billion, then I'll be happy. And then here's where these things are sneaky, man. Next thing you know, I'm going to do $1 billion business and I'm going to donate all this money. And it's all driven out of pain, not love, but pain. And pain is a bad seed, and a bad seed will never bear good fruit. And it can come off and it gets sly and sneaky. And I'm doing this because I want to change the world. It's like, well, let's get honest. If you're truly in pain and you haven't faced the stuff because you're not clean and clear and aligned, then you probably aren't building it out of a true honor. And you can do these honorable things, these noble things, these beautiful things from birth, from a source of pain. And it's, oh man, that's where I got into. It's so crazy. So I kept going with the real estate business, and then I got into personal development. I remember there was like this wake up moment of, okay, I'm off. I was at Coachella Music Festival, and I am like going hog wild out there, man. It looked like Wolf of Wall Street, drugs, alcohol, women, the whole 9 yards.
Okay. And
I remember coming home from that weekend, and I was like, I ran right into a brick wall. It's like, I can't think, I can't speak, it was like, I literally felt like I knocked my IQ down by like 40, 50 points. Like I felt dumb. And I was used to feeling sharp. I was used to feeling able to perform in my businesses. Mm-hmm. I was used to I felt like I was able to went from like, hey, I maybe didn't have everything figured out, but I felt good at least, or at least I thought I did, to like, I am not okay. And that was my wake up moment. Because I literally remember I was Googling, how do you fix your brain after doing too many drugs? What comes up? Meditation. And it's so funny. And I literally have meditated probably 99 out of every 100 days, all the way through for years and years and years and years and years now, since that moment of like finding that, because it's become a staple of my life, and one of my many practices that allows me to stay clean and clear and aligned. But that actually sent me on a whole different path, because through that change and decision that, hey, I want to like start growing internally, like something isn't working, obviously, because I am not happy and I am taking my life down a worse and worse path. Even though I have certain things going on that people would call successful, like certain things. But on the other hand, it's like, I don't feel so good because I've been running and it's starting to catch up with me. And that's how I started getting into personal development. And it's like, I started joining. I remember not that long after that, it was like I was hopping into like my first ever high ticket mastermind. And that was like a whole different, and that was just like a straight personal growth high ticket mastermind. But it was like my eyes were finally being opened, like, whoa, what is this? These guys are talking about something different. And that was like, there was such an interesting path of like, I went from like quitting the job, going all in on the commercial real estate business, to like getting into personal development. And then I started applying personal development to the real estate business. And there's different elements of personal growth. I think personal growth is a very blanket term. There are elements that get you really, really good at ladder climbing. And then there's elements of it that I think sometimes, and I think there's a bit of a gap in the industry, honestly. I think a lot of people train how to be good at ladder climbing. I think a lot of people talk about healing. But if you don't do it, in my experience, and again, I spent, over the years, I've spent probably, I don't know, $500,000 on different coaching programs and masterminds and events and all this stuff. And I was looking for something that would finally be like this. How do I have my cake and eat it too? How do I be successful and feel good too? Because I applied a lot of this stuff I was learning in the personal growth to the real estate business. And next thing you know, a couple of years later, it's an 8-figure real estate business. I'm like, wow, this stuff works. This stuff's amazing.
What kind of personal development things do you mean you were applying to your business? I'm curious.
Yeah, man. I think a lot of the stuff that helped me grow my business, not too far into my personal development journey, I came across a guy named Bob Proctor.
Okay, I was wondering where he came in. I was like, I remember you telling me about that a while back.
And it was so cool. I remember I was out in California in Palm Springs with my girlfriend at the time. Her name was Sophia. And her and I were out there with one of her best friends named Victoria. And Sophia and Victoria and I were out in Palm Springs, and I'm seeing these two women interact. And this is still relatively early in my journey of growth. And I'm seeing them interact. I'm like, wow, they love each other. They got each other's backs. They're challenging each other. They're like having deep, honest, vulnerable, real conversations. That's interesting. I don't think I really have any friends that I do that with. And it was like a moment of like, wow, I want that. And I don't have that at all. All my relationships feel like they have this, back to this layer of this. There was a facade of success in front of me that also kept people out. I couldn't have any real relationships because I wasn't even interacting with people as the real me. I had such a guard up and such a safety net. And I was going through a period of growing out of that. And I remember I see these two interacting, and I like make a decision. I'm like, I want relationships like that. By the end of the year, I'm going to have relationships that look like that. And this was like summer. And so I said, and I wrote down, I remember I wrote down this goal. I'm going to have like loving, vulnerable, authentic connections with people by the end of this year. And a couple days later, we're still out in California, and I'm listening to this Tony Robbins podcast. And you know how Tony is, right? He's yelling at you. He's yelling at you. You got to take massive action. You got to take massive action with his big Tony voice.
Yep.
And this light bulb went off in my head. I was like, oh, I guess I got to do something about that if I want it. And pretty much simultaneously with that, I remembered a guy had posted about Bob Proctor in this Facebook group back in Canada, because I was living in Canada at the time.
Okay.
And it was like this Facebook group of a local networking group for real estate, actually. And he had posted about Bob Proctor, and I had seen it months prior, and I never did anything with it. But all of a sudden I was reminded of it. And for some reason, my intuition said, reach out to this guy.
Okay. So it wasn't like somebody told you about it all of a sudden that day.
No. And I sat down and wrote out a message in California to this guy and said like, hey, you don't know me, but I would love to take you for coffee when I get back to Canada.
Hold on, to Bob Proctor?
No, to this guy who had posted about
you got
Bob
posted.
Proctor.
Okay, I was like, oh snap.
Yeah, that.
I was like, damn, this dude's bold. Go ahead.
I love it.
You know, one time I emailed Eckhart Tolle to get on the podcast, and
yes, you did.
It didn't work out. But hey, I went for it though, right?
I like it, man. Yeah. Hey, you just keep sending it. Eventually, stuff like that does work sometimes.
Oh yeah, man. So
that's the cool thing. That's the cool thing about life is like it's amazing how different things open up when you're willing to put yourself out there.
Yes. Okay, so back to you. Asked this guy for lunch.
So I asked this guy for lunch, and long story short, he worked for Bob Proctor, and I ended up taking one of Bob's programs through him, and that's kind of what Bob's model is. He has a lot of people trained in his philosophy, and they actually coach his programs.
Okay.
So that's actually how I ended up taking Bob Proctor programs and going to that. That's where I set the goal in that program to grow an 8-figure real estate business. And it was crazy. The things that happened to put that together, that was like, there was miracles happening literally to make that happen. And that we can go deeper into that if you want.
Yeah, I was about to say, do you mind? I'm good on time. Like if you want to go ahead and like dive into
I'm happy to jam. I got plenty of time too.
All right, perfect.
So I remember that the real estate business was starting to work. It was like I had a 7-figure project on the go, had another 7-figure project that I was like just getting going on. And it was like, okay, you know what? I want to go for it. I want to have like an 8. It was actually, I set the goal. I wanted to go way bigger. I wanted to do like a $30 million project.
Project. Got you.
Yeah. And I set this goal and this is really interesting because you'll notice another piece of my story and starting to come out. And this is a different piece of it. Well, let me just tell it to you.
Okay.
So the real estate business, I had ended up partnering with my father and a partner he had worked with for a long time on these commercial real estate deals. They had worked together for a long, long time. They had done some commercial real estate in the past, and I saw an opportunity there. And basically I was like, I'll come in, I'll be the young guy, I'll do all the stuff. And I want you guys to like, give me your connections, give me some insight. And that's what I've been running with so far. And it was starting to work. And I had this vision to go bigger. And I remember I told my father about this new goal. I was like, I want to do, and I had a specific piece of land in mind. And I'm like, I want to do this. And he's like, I don't know. It's like, it's quite a bit of money. It's like more than what we like, how are we going to get that money? How are we going to, I like leave that to like the bigger guys, like the bigger real estate developers. Like we like that's a little bit too much.
And this was your dad?
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember having this conversation and it was like, oh, well, that's kind of sucks considering I'm taking this coaching program and this like my whole like goal on the coaching program. And then I go talk to one of the realtors we were working with, and he was a top realtor in the city I was working in and looking at doing this project, and like very top commercial realtor. And I started asking him about it. He's like, I don't know if that project's going to work. It's like, it seems like it might be a little early for that area. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, so my dad, this realtor, none of them think it's going to work. But I'm in this program. I got this goal. Bob's telling me if I can see it in my mind, I can hold it in my hand.
Yep. Bob Proctor. Yep.
Bobby P's giving me the goods. And and it was amazing because there's something that flipped in me that started believing that. And it was one of the first moments that I started not choosing to view my dad as a human instead of this guy that I was putting on a pedestal that had it all figured out.
So you just started seeing him for as he is rather than how you thought.
Well, I started seeing through the veil a little bit, enough to hold to this is what I want to create, even though you don't believe in it necessarily, or don't believe in it as much as I do.
Gotcha.
And I held on to this vision of I want to do this project. A couple months after I set this goal, nothing has changed. Still, no one believes in it except me. We haven't done anything. There's no money raised. There's no land bought. There's nothing. But I'm hanging on to it.
Still believing.
And still believing. And I'm out in And I'm on this personal development kick. The trajectory's taken off. And next thing you know, I'm out in Florida, out in West Palm Beach at Date with Destiny with Tony Robbins.
Okay.
So that's the one that if anyone's seen I Am Not Your Guru on Netflix, that's the event that he films that at, or did film that
so
at.
That's that event.
That's the 5-day event, like his signature flagship back when he was
like
doing
100 hours a day, something like that.
Man, it's literally you don't sleep. It's nonstop. It's a while.
I've heard so many stories. I have yet to go, but it's definitely something I want to do.
It's fun, man. It's really fun. So I'm out there, and it's about a couple days into the event, and I'm walking through the crowd, and we're like on a break or something. And this guy walks up to me and says, like, "Hey, are you from Saskatoon?" And this is the city I was living in Canada at the time. I'm like, yeah. Why do you ask? He's like, I am too. I saw you on the plane. I'm like, huh, that's interesting. We get to talking. He says, like, what do you do? I say, I'm a commercial real estate developer. What do you do? And he's like, well, I'm a commercial realtor. I'm like, oh, that's interesting.
Nice. And then where'd that go?
So we get to talking, and I'm like, well, I got this crazy goal, this idea. I might as well tell a guy at the Tony Robbins event. And I start talking to him. And all of a sudden, he's like, you know what? That's interesting. Let me go back to you on this. I got like some guys I work with. I got a mentor I work with. He was a relatively young guy. And he's like, let me talk to him when we get back, and let's stay in touch on this. And interestingly enough, him, his mentor, and myself, we're all going to a commercial real estate conference in Whistler, Canada the next month.
Just like that.
Just like that. So we meet up out there, and they come to me and they're like, I got all these ideas. We got like all these different tenants you would need to put together a big project like that, like McDonald's and Shell Gasoline and a number of bigger Canadian companies that like you would need to put on a multi 8-figure real estate project like that, a commercial real estate deal like that. And next thing you know, I'm taking this information back to my father and my other partner, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, maybe we could do this. And long story short, about 4 months later, a bunch of stuff comes together, and we're buying the land and we're doing the deal. And it's like that. And that is an example of I was applying the stuff that Bob teaches to climb the ladder faster, which was amazing. Like, what a gift that I was able to go, like, take the leadership in a partnership where I'm with two 60-year-old guys and I'm in my 20s and I'm supposed to be like the junior guy. And I'm like, no, I want to do this. We're going to do this. And somehow we found a way. And there was parts of it that were like borderline miraculous. Like, what are the odds I meet the guy that I meet the guy in Florida? But I mean, you start learning Bob Proctor's stuff, or you start learning how powerful your mind is, and it's not that big of a surprise. And I'm sure you know very much about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is one thing that you and I talked about on our last call that I found very interesting, and I would love for you to kind of, dive into that a little bit more, was you shared with me there's like these levels, right? And it's like, there's an animalistic part of us, right? And like you were,
yes, sir.
Like, you know where I'm going with this. And the reason why, because when you said it rang so hard for me, because growing up, I was like I think I was 4 or 5. I was 4 or 5 when I first started exploring what the heck sex was, right? And I remember I got caught my very first time, which made me feel horrible about myself. And then growing up, I was very shameful about that, right? About, dang, I'm like this really sexually driven person. I'm like, what the heck? Like, I feel so like, going through high school and all of that, feeling wrong. And you were saying as we grow up, we tend to make parts of ourselves wrong.
Yes, sir.
Right.
And that's so you got a story around that. Me being molested at 4, I had a big story around sexuality. And that's one example of many things that we have desires. It's like sex isn't a bad thing, but society, I think a lot of people get the message from society, sex is a bad thing. And I think sex can be used in ways that are destructive or creative.
Of course. But
sex itself is part of life. None of us would be here without sex. It's a wonderful thing. And that's one example of, we have all of these desires, and some of them are a little more wild. Some of them feel like they're bad. And I think a lot of the time we make them wrong, instead of figuring out, when is it appropriate to use? When is it not appropriate to use? Where should we use it? Where should we not use it? And this goes back to the conversation we had. I think a lot of people end up shoving parts of themselves kind of into the basement of their subconscious.
There we go.
I'm because we go through these different phases in life. And I think this is what I shared with you. I think we'll go into it again. Like, we go through these different phases of life. And the first phase is kind of, at least in my experience, is kind of wild. It's like, it was popping out everywhere. It was the crazy phase. It was the wild, young, ego-driven phase of drugs and alcohol, and chase as much money as possible, and as much sex as possible, all this stuff. And it was kind of making a mess in my life. And it kind of came to a head at that Coachella. It was like, wow, I am not okay. And in that moment, I made a decision that I'm going to straighten up. And I went from the wild man to the nice guy, the do things properly guy. I'm gonna clean things up. Stop drugs, stop alcohol. I'm gonna get connected with my spirituality. I'm gonna get up early. I'm gonna do these things properly. I'm not gonna treat women poorly. And I had all these rules came in. And those rules, let me tell you, they were a whole world better than the mess I was making in the wild man phase, in the ego-driven phase, because I wasn't making the mess anymore. Because in that ego-driven phase, I didn't care about you. I didn't care about anyone. I cared about me.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that it was causing pain for others, and it was causing pain for me. So I went into a different mode of, okay, I'm going to do things properly.
Mm.
And hey, what a great thing to stop trying to fill the gap I was feeling by using drugs or alcohol or sex to get there. What a wonderful thing. But I replaced it with something new. I'm going to be good. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to get up early. I'm going to do personal development. I'm going to do things properly. And I think this is where a lot of high achievers end up, is they get sick of the bullshit of not having enough money, of being out of shape, of drugs and alcohol, and whatever that thing is for you that is not working. And it's like, you know what? I'm going to do things properly, and I'm going to find a way to succeed the right way. So I think. And in that moment, we shove this wild part of ourselves down into the subconscious, because it's not going anywhere. You cannot get rid of part of yourself. If you make part of yourself evil, it's just going to go in the basement of your subconscious, and you start leaking energy. And you start going to make these successful things. You start going to do this thing you want to do. And you can kind of do it, but is it tiring? Oh, I got to get up again, put in another 50-hour week, 60-hour week. Oh man, I got a lot to do today. I got a big checklist.
Feels like a lot of effort.
It's a lot of effort, man, because you got a checklist to be the good person, the good boy, the good girl, the back to perfection. If I'm perfect, then I'm doing it right. And that perfect, it's a formula. I'll just check things off the box. I do personal development. I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to work out. I'm going to get engaged. I'm going to have an 8-figure business. I'm going to have all the boxes checked, man. And there's more to it. There's a lot more to it. And I think a lot of people don't talk about the more to it.
Yeah. And I feel like, well, for me, at least, that next level of life, I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs, like you said, it's like, and like I said, I can say like, I'm very, this resonates with me because I personally did all of those things. And for me, it started with weight loss. So like, as you know, a part of my journey was losing the 91 pounds. But now that I look back at it, that weight loss came out of the most ugliest place. I was like, I hate that there is a part of myself that is so addicted to just destroying himself. Because my life was like, that was my wild phase. It was horrible. And a lot of it was with food.
Yeah.
And do you feel like a lot of entrepreneurs stay there? Like, is there another phase of like development or whatever we're gonna like, whatever words we're gonna be using for this?
Yeah, and I would say, and you call it the wild phase to the doing it properly phase, but there's something beyond perfection, because perfection isn't really perfect. It's hiding something. If you're trying to be perfect, you're hiding something.
Oh,
So is what I've learned in my life. And I lived it for way, way, way too long. And it caused me all sorts of pain, and subtle pain, because now you're keeping up this facade of I got it together. I got a big business. I'm a leader. I speak on stages. I'm successful. I'm in shape. Oh man. And now who do you talk now? Like it's a lot easier to ask for help when you're willing to admit that things aren't working. It's really hard when you're keeping it all together because you got it all together, so you say.
Like damaging that image of yourself.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And the only way to get to this next phase, which I would call integrated, you're living a truly aligned life. You're actually clear on what matters to you. You're actually feeling clean and clear mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. You accept all parts of yourself and you actually get them into alignment to create something greater. And that's what it looks like to be integrated. And I started entering this phase of life when I realized, and it was another really difficult point. And it is like, I think a lot of time, like people talk about, it's like you hear the whispers, right? It's like, I know I'm supposed to do something, but I don't know. And then if you don't listen to the whispers, sometimes it gets a little louder. Maybe you get a little tap on the shoulder. And maybe if you don't listen to that, then you kind of get a slap in the face. And if you don't want to listen to that, they might take you to this spiritual 2x4 up the side of the head. And it somewhere between a slap and a 2x4, another one woke me up, because at that same Tony Robbins event, I was with, it's funny. So I was dating Sophia at the time. And at that event, another kind of light bulb moment for me is like, I want to marry this woman. Well, light bulb moment for her was, I think I'm done with this guy.
So that was another like 2x4, right?
Yeah, man. And it was amazing because that shake up, it was like, I am not living authentically with myself. I want to start a personal development business. I want to start mentoring people. I want to start helping people, because this stuff, even though I didn't have it all figured out, I was obsessed with it. I loved it. It was helping me. When I talked to other people about it, it was helping them. It was like, it was my truth. I had finally found something that I was great at, that I loved to do, that I couldn't wait. I would pay money to do it. And if people, like, let alone start a business out of it, I was paying money. It's all I was working 5 or 10 hours a week on real estate, and I was focused. Here's a theme. Here's a good theme. It's like, I don't actually want to show up to my real estate business. I don't actually want to show up to the restaurant job. I'm doing what I need to do in the most efficient way to get it done, but I'm only showing up because I feel obligated to. Not because I want to, because I feel obligated to. Because if I show up to my obligations, then I'll be successful, and then everything will be okay. Or at least I can pretend it will be.
So if you have that supposed to energy, that obligation energy, chances are you should probably pay.
Chances are you're in trouble. And I'll put a caveat on that. I mean, if you're making $500 a month and you got to pay the rent, well, get your ass together. And that's where the Gary Vee and the Grant Cardone and the hustle and grind and get your shit together is wonderful. Because it
has its place.
It's like, get it together. Let's go make $5,000 a month so you can pay the rent. But what gets you from A to B does not get you from B to C. And what gets you from not survival to survival will not take you from survival to thrive. They're very different things. And I think a lot of achievers take that grind and hustle mentality all the way through to like, okay, now I'm making $15K a month. I'm making $30K a month. I'm making $50K a month. And I'm still acting like I'm trying to survive, because I'm running away from my pain, because I'm not actually aligned, because I don't know how to live an integrated life. I'm still trying to be perfect and keep it all together. And I might even logically understand that, but I don't know how to change it. And that's where I came to a point.
So you keep saying this word integrated, right?
Yeah, man.
It's an integrated life. So like that animalistic part of yourself, right? These other parts of ourselves, those wild desires that are a little out there, or whatever that is, right? Can you give us an example of how you have personally integrated one of these parts of yourself, just so like I'm just genuinely curious in what that looked like for you.
Totally, man. I think it's a really interesting question. And I think anytime you have a desire or an emotion or a feeling and you ignore it instead of pay attention to it and make it wrong instead of make it curious, you're going to get into trouble. And it was like, here's an example of like a desire I had was, and it doesn't have to be something that wild. It can just be something opposite of what's in the direction of your goal.
Yeah. Or what's opposite of what's normal to like other people.
What's normal, what's in the direction of what you think you're supposed to be.
That energy. There we go.
The facade that you're keeping up. And I'll give you a really simple example because it doesn't have to be something wild. Like I had these crazy, wild sexual fantasies, and like it could be. But I'll just give you a simple example to start with. It's like I was working my ass off, working like 50, 60 hours a week, trying to grow my businesses. And I was exhausted. I needed rest. There was something that was not working. And I was ignoring that part. I was ignoring the part of me that said, man, something's not working. Something's not right. Something's not working. Something's not right. I was getting the whispers. And I was in a business partnership at the time. And here's another part of my story that you'll see. First, I thought I needed my dad for success. That's not what he told me, but that's a belief I adopted somewhere along the way. It wasn't the truth. It's not what he would have told me. But it's somewhere along the lines, I took that on.
You convinced yourself, yeah?
I convinced myself I can't be successful without him. And then when I finally started, and then finally it's like, so boring out of back to Sophia and I, we part ways at that point. And one of the first things that comes up for me is like, I need to start a coaching business. I need to. But I'm a little bit afraid. So I'm going to start with a partner. And there were some good, he is an amazing guy, still great friends with him. And it wasn't really my truth. I was just afraid. And it was another lesson on the spiral staircase. First it's, hey, let's not be a doctor. Let's go into business. Okay, let's quit the restaurant job. Let's go full stride in the real estate. Okay, let's, you know what, real estate, even though it's now I just got my 8-figure project, you know what, I got to get into coaching. But there was a subtle compromise in all of those.
A subtle compromise.
And there was another version of that subtle compromise. And I'm working, and things aren't really working in the coaching business. I mean, sure, we did great. By all standards, objective standards, we started. So I ended up working with Bob Proctor.
Okay.
So the guy I was partnering with, his name was Graham. And that's
when you started doing coaching for the first time.
That's when I started doing coaching for the first time.
Okay. All right.
And I would have called that was coaching. We were talking about mentorship a little bit, you and I, prior to the call. And I would say mentorship's a little bit different than coaching, but that's when I started coaching, teaching people things that I had kind of learned, had lived a little bit. And Graham and I partner up and we're like, you know what, we're both high achievers, both like he had a successful company. I had a successful real estate business. Like, no, we're going to send it. We're going to get into Bob Proctor's inner circle. And that was like his top 1% or whatever of consultants. There's like 30 of them. And I think top 2%, because there's about 30 of them at the time. And there's about 1,500 consultants. And you had to like get a certain amount of sales. And it's like, you got extra training with Bob and you got all this. And it was like, hey, yeah, this is what we want to do. And 6 months later, we did that. And I thought, again, I thought it was working, and parts of it was like, that's amazing. Yet I remember I had just gotten in Bob Proctor's inner circle. This is only like 5 months after buying the land to do that big real estate project. Sophia and we ended up getting back together and I just proposed to her. And I'm at this external high. Everything's working. The real estate, the coaching. Sophia and I are back together and engaged. I'm in the best shape of my life. We're traveling the world. And it's amazing because I was at one of the lowest points in my life internally. I was bankrupt because it was just, even the coaching business, every single piece of it, even though it was heading in the direction of more and more alignment, I didn't feel good inside, man. I did not. I felt internally bankrupt. And what do you do when you are have everything that you thought you wanted and you still don't feel right. That's a big problem.
Like a lot of people find themselves in that position.
Yes, it's really, really tough. And often we think the solution is more. Oh, okay. If I just got, and we set another goal as high achievers and we start running again. And we use that as just like I was using drugs and alcohol to numb out. Then I used work to numb out. And we start running after our new goals. And then I used personal development to numb out. And I start, hey, if I just climb the ladder faster to the next crazy goal, then I'll finally feel okay. And back to talking about living aligned, you cannot live aligned when you're ignoring parts of yourself. Because there was a part of me that was exhausted. There was a part of me that didn't feel good. There was a part of me that needed some healing. There was a part of me that needed to express things. And here's the example. So from the business with Graham, it was like part of me, it was a great start. We got in Bob Proctor's inner circle, that something wasn't working. It didn't feel right. And I wasn't connected enough to my truth. I wasn't clear enough to know that for a long, long time. Even though it was true, I had whispers, but I didn't hear it loud enough. So I had to wait for probably a slap in that one. Actually, no, I'd call it a 2x4 because not that far in. So that's not working. And it's not working so bad. And this is a great part of my story.
Real quick, when you say it's not working, internally, you're not feeling right. That's what you mean.
Internally, I'm not feeling
it's
right.
Working.
Externally, it's working, but not working like I know it should.
Oh, okay. Got you.
It's got a little bit it's a little bit rocky, like everything. It was like I kept trying to build 100-story skyscrapers, and I'd get to the 50th or 70th floor, and then it'd start crumbling down again. And I'd try to build it up again, and it'd crumble down again. And I was so exhausted because so much of my energy was spent build, because I kept having to fight this disintegration because I wasn't building on a foundation of alignment. So I was always fighting. These things weren't really working. It was kind of working, but not really working. And it's stressful, man. And it got to a point where it was like, things weren't working at the level I knew they should be. I didn't feel fulfilled, even though I had all the things I thought I needed to feel fulfilled. And I got to a point that was so low, man. I remember I was back in Florida in Palm Beach, and I was on vacation. I'm at the top of this hotel, about 25 stories up, and I'm looking out at the ocean. And all of a sudden I look down and I have this thought, it'd be easier to jump off this building than to keep going the way I'm going.
Wow.
And I started entertaining that thought briefly, and I literally scared myself. I had to back away from the edge because I didn't trust myself.
Wow.
Because I was so busy running after the next thing, and then that wasn't working. And again, man, I wasn't aligned. I wasn't clean and clear and connected. And it was sucking the life out of me slowly but surely. And it was so hard because I wasn't willing to talk about it with anyone. Even the few people that I would talk about it with didn't really seem to have a solution for me. It was hard, man. It was an ugly season.
Now, one of the things is, I know, what you're currently doing, and you help, entrepreneurs with this kind of work, right? So
100%,
I know that you have a process, a framework of your own. What do you work on whatever you feel comfortable sharing? What's like the
Totally,
things
man.
you focus on when you get a new client, and like, what's your direction with them?
Yeah, man. I think I've been saying these words clean and clear and aligned a lot. And I think that is a big part of my work. Is I take people through a process of, you cannot get to the point of aligned and integrated when you have elements of your life that are not clean and clear. And what I mean by clean and clear, I break it into different categories: physically clean and clear, mentally clean and clear, emotionally clean and clear, even spiritually. There's an element of like, you got to get right. And until you get aligned in all those areas and actually understand what the process looks like for you, and it's not the same for everyone, there's certain directions you can go. And I think a lot of people understand the basics of like, hey, I'm going to be more clean and clear if I don't do drugs than if I do drugs. I'm going to be more clean and clear if I eat healthier. I'm going to be more clean and clear if I work out a bit. But there is a very specific way of doing that. And I think it differs for every single person. And to find that right path of clean and clear in all those categories. And again, is the spiral staircase. It's like, okay, well, I kind of knew emotional stuff. I went from an emotional zombie to like, I can be emotional and have emotional conversations. I can have intimacy in my relationships, but I still hadn't really learned how to navigate my emotions at the level I needed to reach the next level of integration. And integration, you start realizing that integration is a game that never ends. It is not a checklist thing. Because the purpose of a goal, and again, I knew this stuff intellectually, man. Bob Proctor, Tony Robbins, they both say something along the lines of the purpose of a goal is not to get, it is to become. It's not to check the box of I caught it. It is to go for it, to become someone new, to see who you need to become in the process. But I didn't know that in an embodied state. I just knew that intellectually. I didn't live that.
So integration, really quick, just so the listeners understand, if you can just put what integration actually is, and I guess in your own words, of course, 1 or 2 sentences.
Yeah, man. It's a great question.
Yeah.
There's so much that goes into living an integrated life. And I'm going to start by telling you what it's not.
Okay.
It's not rejecting parts of yourself. It's not ignoring your feelings. It's not running and working 50, 60 hours a week and ignoring your family life and your mental health and your emotional health. It's not trying to prove something.
I feel like when we know what it's not, we have a really good idea of what it is.
So what it is, exactly, man. But what it is it's accepting all parts of yourself, not just intellectually, not just I pretend to, but you actually, because the subconscious is a complicated thing, man. And I think you know that better than almost anyone. Is like, it's one thing to say, I know I'm supposed to accept all parts of myself. Well, how do we actually do that? That's a practice. There's a depth of understanding. You might even understand it logically how to do that, but do you actually live it? There's lots of people how do you get in better shape? Well, if you want to lose some weight and get some bigger muscles, we'll stop eating so much and go to the gym. It's not that complicated. Yet people struggle with this. Well, how do you become more integrated? Like, it's like there's elements of it that it's like logically we get, but there is a nuance to the practice. But what else? I think a big part of integration too is we get enough clarity and enough connection that we know what our truth is. And our truth is not something that is like this thing that we can put on the wall and like, this is my truth. It is a moment to moment real life experience of I know what to do next because I am clear and I am connected. Wow. And from that place, you can start living life of like, I know what my next step is toward my grander vision that I'm starting to get more pieces of, but I'm not so attached to it because I'm not trying to prove anything, but I'm heading in this direction. And I know it's rooted in, and again, goes back to like, there's an element of understanding. And I think a big part that people maybe get logically, but don't really get at an embodied level of, if you are not rooting your life and your vision and your goals in love, growth, and contribution, you're going to start running into some issues because those are fundamental principles of how this whole universe is wired up.
So say that again, growth,
love, growth, and contribution. If you are not rooted on love, growth, and contribution, you are building on a foundation that will crumble. But this is the thing, man, is we can intellectually agree with that all day long. I intellectually would have agreed with that when I was 18 years old and drinking and doing drugs and using sex to feed my ego. I would have agreed with that. Those are good things, yeah. But I didn't live it. I would have agreed with that when I was running my coaching business and newly engaged and having my real estate business and doing things properly and living perfect. So I was trying to tell the world, at least, even though I wasn't. But the truth of it was that my actions didn't embody the amount of love that I should have because I was so busy working and being depressed and being stressed that I wasn't present for my new fiance. I wasn't there for my family. I wasn't really living them at the level I wanted to, nor was I growing or contributing at the level I wanted to, because I was still trying to run from pain. So these are fundamental principles, but to actually live in alignment with them is a different thing. But as you get more and more integration, and you start living not the ways that the unintegrated person lives, and certainly not back in the wild phase. And I don't think many people listening to this will be in the wild phase. I think a lot of people will be high achievers.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people will be, it's like, I thought I was doing it right. And it's like, you're doing it great compared to 95% of the population, 98 or 99% of the population. And there's more.
Yep.
The journey doesn't end. And another big part, and I think where you end up in integration, is you start feeling like you are lit up. Like, it's like Warren Buffett says he tap dances to work every day. It's like, I heard that when I was 14, 13 years old that I wanted to do that. I actually tap dance to work every day. I don't do things out of obligation anymore. My business is not an obligation. My real estate business is not an obligation. My coaching business, my mentorship is not an obligation. I do them out of joy. And if I don't want to do it, I check in with that. Is that a part of me that's like, that's afraid? What's going on there? And or is there a piece of alignment? Like, is there a partnership? Is there a direction I'm heading? But how do we know these things if we're not clean and clear and connected? You cannot discern what part is the problem. You can't tell if it's, oh, I just didn't sleep that well, or, oh, my emotions are off, or, oh, I'm just momentarily in fear and I need to actually, or, oh, I haven't connected with my friends, or what is this thing that's in the way? You can't find that if you're completely disconnected. And you cannot be very connected if you're not living integrated, because you're ignoring a big part of yourself. You're pushing a bunch of parts of yourself down, getting them out of the way, just so you can run faster at the goal. So you can finally feel okay. But even when you hit it, and we all know this from experience.
Yep.
Once you hit it, you're happy for a week, a day, a couple hours. And then, oh, is this it? Okay, I'll set another goal.
Yep.
And I'm not saying to stop setting goals. Goals are great. There's a metaphor I love. If you want, I can share it around this concept.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's a metaphor that I got from a mentor I worked with years ago, but I've since built upon it and shared a little bit differently. So it's called chasing the white rabbit. And imagine you got a dog. You ever had a dog before, man?
Yeah, it's been a while, but yeah.
What was your dog's name?
Rebel. Let's go with Rebel. We're gonna go with that dog. It's a cool dog. Favorite dog.
Rebel. So you got Rebel, and you're out there with Rebel, and you're playing catch with this white rabbit toy, and you're throwing it back and forth. And you got Rebel, and say you got another dog, and this other dog's name's Buddy. So you got Rebel and you got Buddy, and you're playing catch with these two dogs. You're babysitting Buddy for your friend, and you're throwing the white rabbit toy, and Rebel and Buddy go chasing after it all the way. They're just booking it down the grass out in the field, and Rebel's way faster than Buddy, so he catches it every single time. And you got playing for half an hour, and Rebel's catching this rabbit every single time, and Buddy is not catching it. Yet he keeps chasing, and every time Rebel comes back, he drops this thing at your feet. He wants you to throw it again. There is so much wisdom in what's going on there if we actually pay attention. First of all, Rebel catches it every time. He gets his goal every time. Buddy never gets it. Yet they both are excited to run every time. They both wag their tail all the way there and all the way back. Here's another piece of the lesson. Rebel gets it every time. What is he can't wait to do? He runs back to you and drops it at your feet because he wants to go again. Two big lessons in here. One, let's wag our tail at the goal the whole way. Because even once we catch it, even if we're Rebel and we win every time, all we're going to want is to bring it back and throw out a new goal and chase it again.
Exactly.
But the problem is until we've started living an integrated life, we're probably chasing the rabbit with our tail between our legs, feeling stressed, feeling burnt out, ignoring critical pieces of our life, like our physical health, like our emotional health, like our mental health. We're letting our relationships fall apart. We keep building on this crumbling foundation. We're wondering why we get to the 70th floor and it starts falling out again, and we're always busy and it's not seem to be working, and we feel obligated to our work. And because you're not wagging your tail, you don't actually tap dance to work every day. You don't actually enjoy everything you do every day. And it's not that everything needs to change. Some things might, and it's back to its nuance. Some things might need to change, but some things might be how you're approaching what you're doing. Probably a combination of the two.
And the only way to find out is through doing the work, doing the.
You got to do the work. You got to get into a practice, and you start looking at it as a practice too. Because it isn't a checklist. I just shared this with some of my clients yesterday. I think it's one of the best frames I can give you for living this way. Stop looking at your life and your goals as a checklist. Start looking at it like a treasure hunt.
Yeah, hell yeah, man. Just the energy you get from that perspective shift alone.
Yeah, man.
Beautiful. Now, one of my last questions for you, brother, is I don't ask this to everybody, but I asked it to my last guest, and now I'm just like really curious as to what it is for you. What would you say your one to two top books for you that really, had a profound, some of the biggest impacts on you? And 1 to 2 podcasts that you like. If you listen to any kind of podcast or anything like that, like what are you listening to, Parker?
No, that's a great question. And it's evolved a lot, man.
Oh yeah, and I know. When I get asked this question, I'm like, man, it's kind of on the book part too.
Well, it's evolved a lot, and it's evolved even more as I've more and more stepped into alignment and connection. My life is not led by my plan anymore. When I talk about the treasure hunt versus the checklist is my plan. If I am truly connected, I am tapping into my intuition, and I'm getting a plan that is coming through me.
I'm getting a plan.
And I'm getting a plan that's rooted in true love, growth, and contribution. I'm not getting my plan, because my plan probably has a lot of personal gain and personal running from fear in it. I'm getting a plan that is rooted in love, growth, and contribution, and serves me and the world.
Wow. Damn. That was powerful, because I actually have, and I talked about it with you a long time ago. The entire business plan is sitting in my docs, and it's something that came through me during a meditation, and it was something I would never do. I never pictured myself doing something like that, but it came through, and it felt so goddamn good. And I was just thinking about this was really good, and it was not my plan. And it's crazy because as weeks go by, I get like another piece of it. I'm like, oh, that'll be cool too, but nah. It's like, and so like that right there, I like paused for a second, because I was just like, there's a plan that clearly came, something I need to pay attention to. So I appreciate that reminder.
I'm glad. And it that sums it up. And you will get, and this is very, very common, you will get pieces of a vision that are way greater than you could ever accomplish on your own. Yet things can seem to fall together. You can accomplish 10 to 100 times as much with half to a quarter of the energy when you're actually aligned and connected and working on a plan, the plan, but not your plan.
Like that
or not your plan alone. And this goes back to alignment. Can you have personal desires? Of course. I want a relationship. I want to make more money. I want to be in better shape. Wonderful. And if you do that from an aligned place, from a plan that you are waiting for, and you'll get pieces of it, and you'll also have to stay paying attention. And this is one of the biggest flaws I think we run into, man. Personally, this has gotten me in so much trouble, is we get part of a plan, and then we attach ourselves to the plan, and we fall in love with the plan. We start running 1,000,000 miles an hour at the plan. And this is where I was with the coaching business, the newly engaged, the Bob Proctor's Inner Circle, the big real estate company. And I'm running 1,000,000 miles an hour at the next step of the plan. And I was so busy running that I wasn't paying attention to what was. And in my lack of paying attention to what was in the present moment, because I wasn't clean and clear and connected, I was running off cliffs that I couldn't even see, except it was starting to manifest in my inner world. It was starting to manifest in my relationship. It was starting to manifest in my mental health. But I couldn't see that was the problem because I was so busy running.
Yeah.
Because I was so busy checking the list. Because if once I finally get there, then I can relax. It's like, well, it's more than that. So back to your question on books, it's like, honestly, what books I read now is very much based on what I am getting called to in the moment. It's intuitive. My life is led by my intuition. You cannot have fulfillment living from the head up, from the neck up.
Yeah, 100% agree. You
cannot have fulfillment living from the neck up. We have a heart, we have an intuition. Most people got it flipped. They're living completely from their head. They might have a little bit of a heart, and they don't even know what their intuition is. We want to lead from our intuition. Are our head and heart enemies? No, they're wonderful, but they're not meant to lead. You lead with your intuition. You have a heart, you connect with it. You use your head to solve problems. It's way different. We need to start living from our intuition. We need to start living from a place of connection, but we cannot live from a place of connection and then actually have real clarity that's rooted in love, growth, and contribution until we do the work. But so back to your question, it's like, well, what's one of the books that I am benefiting from reading most right now? Well, this is what I used to read. This is called The Hidden Power by Thomas Troward. I heard
about that one.
It's amazing, man. I used to, back when I was in Bob Proctor's inner circle, we would read this with Bob all the time. We'd read the same chapter over and over and over and over again because there's so much depth to it. It's amazing. And also, it's not going to do you much good unless you're feeling called to it.
Exactly.
Or it won't do you as, I shouldn't say much good. It won't do you as much good as something else might that your intuition leads you to. Because my intuition could lead me to a completely different book. So I think there's so many amazing books. Like back working with Bob, Think and Grow Rich was hit. I'll share, if you're curious, I'll share his favorite 3 books.
Go ahead.
So Think and Grow Rich, As a Man Thinketh, and U Squared. All 3 are amazing books.
I've read all of those, but U Swear. I haven't read U Swear.
And they're all amazing for different reasons. And I'll also put a caveat on those. I was reading those and I was getting better at ladder climbing, not getting better at living an integrated life. I wasn't living in alignment. I wasn't very connected. And I was creating more and more quote unquote success and feeling more and more internally bankrupt because I was running from the shadow. I was running from my shadow. That's back to what we were talking about at the beginning, man. We have these parts of ourselves that we push into the shadows because we're so busy either avoiding our pain, and that's often manifests in, again, like the wild phase, the ego-based phase. And then we're avoiding our pain by being good and doing things properly and being successful. But we're still doing it because we're avoiding pain. And then we get to a point where we're not in so much pain, or we're in less and less pain. And we're actually doing our plans out of a place of connection. We're doing our plans out of a place of, it's not just my plan. It hits a lot of the boxes that get me excited, but from a place that actually leads to love, growth, and contribution in the world. And when you start following that plan, things start working on a way different level, man. Because that coaching business that I was struggling to for a long time, that I was struggling to get it to work the way I wanted to. I had a specific amount of money that I wanted to make, and I had this idea in my head of how it was supposed to be. Once I actually got aligned, I did what I thought I wanted to do in a month, in a week.
That's how it works out, huh?
That's how it works when you're actually living in alignment. And guess what? I didn't have to struggle that week. It was a fun week. It wasn't effortless, but it wasn't effortful either. I was doing my part and I was allowing it to happen out of joy, out of love for what I was doing. And it's a way different way to live, man.
I would say one of my biggest takeaways from this conversation is just paying attention to where you're acting from and where that energy's at. And personally, for me, that was very big. So, man, this has been a beautiful conversation, Parker. Like, shit, I feel like we can just go on for hours, man. But at the end of the day, we do got to put a cap on this thing eventually. So I wanted to go ahead and ask these two questions to you that I ask to every single guest. And that first one is, well, really quick. If somebody wants to get in contact with you, because I can imagine they're going to want to, right? So if somebody wants to get in contact with you, reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you? And I'll be sure to include all of your links in the show notes below.
Appreciate you, man. And I would say, like, I'm not a hard guy to reach. Add me on Facebook, Parker, Jayparker, Jay, Parker J. Add me on Facebook, friend request me. I'll accept your friend request. We can start a conversation. I'd love to talk to anyone who hears this. I think there's a lot of people who try to be like Mr. Guru and I'm hard to access. And it's like, I just want to help people, man.
Yeah,
I'm here.
Exactly.
I'm here. If someone's got a question, I'm here for it. So reach out to me, friend me. I would love to talk to you.
Beautiful. Well, guys, you heard it directly from him. All right. So I'll include his Facebook link, all of his links below. Now, now to those two questions. Who do you know that I should know and bring onto this podcast? How do you think I get such a good guest, man?
Good. That's a good word. I would say two guys come to mind. Bucky O'Neill, who's amazing, man. Expert in transformation. He's actually helping me get set up. It's another piece I'll mention. I'm going to start running events this year and do a lot of this work we've been talking about in an in-person setting where we can move through a lot of integration that would normally take months or years in a day.
Oh,
I'm going to start running events this year. And if anyone's interested, just reach out to me. I'd love to have you out.
Yeah, I'm about to say, definitely get into his world.
And he's actually my mentor for running events. He's been running events his entire life. He's such an amazing guy. And he is actually one of my mentors for how I'm setting up my events. He is absolutely
well. You already
awesome
know.
Guy.
I want to be one of the first to hear about that. So definitely let me know, and that's when all that's coming out, man.
Yeah, man, come on out.
So Bucky O'Neill, beautiful. You said two names are coming to mind.
Yeah, the other guy is Lucas Rubix, friend of mine. Met him through Traffic and Funnels, which is actually how you and I met as well. And he's a really, really cool guy. He's been in the coaching game for a long. Lucas Rubix, been in the coaching game for a long time. He's also a fellow former Canadian like I am. We never got to that part of my story, but I moved to Nashville earlier this year, and I've never been happier in my life than living in Nashville. It's been amazing. And he also got out of Canada. I think he's currently booting around Mexico and kind of being an entrepreneurial nomad. But he is just a wonderful, amazing human being. I think you two would have such a good conversation.
Dude, thank you so much. Thank you so much, man. And last question here. If there was 60 seconds left for your experience, right? And 60 seconds left in your life, and you knew that was it, what would be your final message to the world that you would just want to get out?
Stop trying to prove something. You don't need to prove that you're enough. You are enough. You are loved. And do the work that it takes to connect to that. Because anything that you're creating in your life that is born out of pain will just lead to more pain. And there is a way to actually feel loved, to actually feel enough. And then from that place, on that foundation of love, can we go to a place of growth and contribution? Of course. Create the biggest things in your vision. In fact, just like Adrian was saying earlier, he's got this vision that's so big that I can't even fathom creating it. But you can create it when it's based in love, growth, and contribution, and you've gotten yourself out of the way and you just let it happen through you. Let life happen through you. Stop trying to force it.